Hey, this is Skipen. For those that don't know, I'm a huge Magic the Gathering fan as well as just card games in general. I've been playing ever since I was a kid. I had a little bit of a hiatus there, but actually when I got started playing Magic, Kamigawa was still relatively fresh, and I remember getting a tournament pack, opening it up, and getting a foil Sensei's Divining Top. So it was a pretty good memory as far as Kamigawa and Magic the Gathering goes. I've also always had this idea of kind of sharing that interest, that hobby of Magic on this channel, maybe through gameplay or stuff like this, where I'm drawing myself as a card. And I thought that with the new Kamigawa set coming out being so like Japanese related, Japanese flavor, I thought it'd be a perfect fit for the channel. And I've been wanting to do this kind of thing for a while now, even during the Strixhaven block or the Strixhaven set. Um, I thought about maybe drawing myself into one of the schools, something like that, but it never came to fruition. But I think this is a much better opportunity for me, especially with that new kind of cyberpunk theme. It's something that I've never really explored much, so I thought it'd be a good kind of option for me to explore different themes, different projects, and do something fun and interesting on stream for the channel. And also, I thought the new mechanic of reconfigure was really interesting. It's something that maybe fits into a theme that I could use for a card. Tsukepen, my pen name, is the pen that manga artists use to draw comics and other analog kind of drawings. And so I thought it fit well as an artifact, but it's also me, and I can have that kind of artifact equipment creature theme with reconfigure. Um, the template I came up with just kind of quickly was Tsukepen 2 mana. Maybe later we'll put some mana symbols, and whenever Tsukepen or equipped creature becomes tapped, create a drawing artifact token. So again, kind of going with my theme and the things I like to do. I don't know what that drawing token would do. Maybe we'll come up with it later on with reconfigure 2, and the stats are 1 power and 2 toughness. So, maybe we can work on it, workshop it a little bit. But more than that, just to do some kind of drawing on stream with a fun theme on a set that I'm really looking forward to. Yep, so let's get started. And today, again, I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint. It's an A4 size canvas at 300 DPI, give or take. And I'm going to try to do at least finish the sketch today and maybe continue on tomorrow or the next day to see if I can finish the drawing on stream along with the release of the new set. So I have a lot of fond memories of playing card games at a local shop in my hometown. And actually, they had like not drawing classes, but it was a comic book shop that also had different groups come in. So sometimes you would have like Star Trek fans come in and watch Star Trek episodes. Sometimes you would have card games being played, tournaments and stuff like that. But once a week at some point, sometimes it was once a month, they had comic book artists come in and kind of give a class and draw with everyone. And that's where I really was able to get a live experience and learn important techniques that I kind of want to implement and talk about on the channel at some point. And the other thing that's interesting about the new Neon Dynasty set is that they have very anime inspired or actually drawn by anime and manga artist cards. The alternate art stuff looks really interesting. I know that in the past they've had limited edition or secret layer and other type of cards with alternative art styles, but this is a pretty far departure from the traditional Magic the Gathering card. And I was just a really big fan of the Kamigawa block to begin with because of all the Japanese themes, and in general, I've been a big fan of Magic the Gathering art. I think it's what drew me to the game at first, and then the mechanics, of course, are really interesting, and it's a fun game to play, but I've always been impressed by the art. In general, it'd be a big dream for me to draw any kind of card art and have it actually published and have a physical copy of that. So maybe that's something to really work towards in the future. And for those that didn't know, you can actually kind of get yourself into Magic the Gathering, but you have to win the World Championship, and then they make and design a card in your likeness with the themes and kind of play style that you like. But I'm not really a competitive player, and I don't think I have any aspirations to win the World Championship. But you know, I do like to draw, so I'm going to take advantage of that and try to put myself into the game that way. I think it's something interesting to do on a live stream or on the channel. You know, when an interesting set comes out or something that I'm interested in is coming out. Maybe even stream a little bit of gameplay on Arena and stuff like that would be interesting. So I was a little bit, like I was saying about the anime style cards. I guess this time I'll try to do it in that style, but I really like the more realistic look of Magic cards. So I think in the future I'll try to do a more realistic looking portrait. Because lately I haven't had much opportunity to do that kind of stuff, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. And it's a great exercise for any kind of artist. If you draw in different styles, it gives you a good perspective into uh, maybe your weak points. You know, if you aren't so strong in anatomy, then drawing in a more realistic style could really show what you need to study and focus on. So maybe we could have something like this. You know, it doesn't have to be too serious. And even some of the like I think Magic cards are typically like really these like serious fantasy looking cards, but this set's quite the departure, and especially with some of those alternate art cards. Well, I guess you do have some comical Magic cards as well, but um, the more anime styled ones can be a little bit more playful and all. And on the last stream I did, I was talking about that mesh transform. It's something that really comes in handy at all stages of the drawing process, whether it's in the sketch, trying to take whatever base you laid down and conform it to a more appropriate look. If you feel like the anatomy wasn't as good or something, taking that mesh transform is always an excellent way to keep your lines, keep the work that you've done, but fix it so that you don't have a big headache later on in the drawing. Or maybe I don't know how like serious I want to get. Not serious, but how like fanciful I want to get. Maybe actually what I should do is like one of those huge brushes sometimes you see for Japanese calligraphy that have it as like this big weapon for this character. That's probably more dynamic and interesting. But I'll see. Let me do a few different thumbnails or so thumbnails I was talking about earlier about the kind of comic book class that I took at my local card game shop or a comic book shop. That was one of the actual like comic artists there talked about drawing thumbnails. Thumbnails are these, basically the size of your thumb, a very, very small sketch so that you get a good idea for posing and action scenes, stuff like that. So you're not drawing the full, you're not spending a lot of time on something, but you can kind of understand the composition and the look that you're going for. So that was one of the things that I always remember from the class was drawing thumbnails. So now what would that big brush look like? And it could be as simple as this, just to get your composition down and find, the look that you want, the composition, the anatomy, stuff like that. Maybe. But I think something more dynamic would probably be interesting. So this seems like maybe something more suited to the theme of Neon Dynasty, maybe more of like a Yankee style pose with that big brush. Hmm. Or maybe something more actiony, like it also doesn't, you have to think about the composition of the card as well. These things are typically more of a square. So how are you going to fit everything you want into a square or whatever frame you have? So far, I really like this one. But let me see if I could come up with something really quick. And it's something I should do more of with thumbnails like this, just because it saves you a lot of time. Sometimes you can do, imagine doing this more detailed and then decide, or imagine doing like this more detailed or this more detailed and then not liking the results. You spent a lot of time and effort when you could kind of do a lot of the workshopping at a stage like this. Let me also pull up. I think this will be a good pose. Let me see if I could get. Yeah, I think let's go. Let's try to do that a little bit more detailed now. Because there's even like there's interesting characters like the DJ and even the samurai with kind of that like pompadour Yankee style look, so it's probably pretty appropriate for the set, the themes and everything. And I think it'd be fun to draw and it'd be a good kind of challenge, I guess, for me. The pose, the cyberpunk look and all that, definitely not something I'm super used to. Let me try to also do show the skeleton a little bit more. And I think I've always had issues with, not issues, but trouble drawing these kind of hunched back poses or like more complex dynamic poses. So I think it'll be good practice, especially to work through on stream and try to explain the process of how I would go about doing so. So I think the thing here to always pay attention to is the neck. If you think about when you're hunched over like this, your head is typically going forward, like, and you want this these lines of kind of your hips and your neck. You want to pay close attention to that. So like normally I guess you would have the face here and the neck is like this, But with this kind of thing, it's kind of a 2/3 look, but the neck is coming out more like that. Maybe I'll start with this. I like that. And it's just a difficult pose in general to do. So I think if I get it down right, um, the composition and the overall piece will be much better. So if you see here, even you can kind of easily do like a ninja style run with this kind of pose, or with this general look, I guess. It's a similar scale, like the skeleton is probably similar in a way. And that's another interesting dynamic pose that we could use, but I'm going to try my best to get this to work out. I think the other thing that will be difficult is getting the hands like that to go over the brush completely. So it's like, oops, you know, you're so if you, so I think instead what I had here in the thumbnail, this is the other thing that isn't always apparent with thumbnails. It's good to do them. I'm going to bring this up here, and with a thumbnail I have something like this. But really I think if you were physically holding an item, and this is something that's hard to imagine and why it's good to do these kinds of exercises and thumbnails, I think the hands go down more, come up, and then the hand, like the arms, the shoulders are slumped, the elbows are down, and then the hands come over the item. Like this. So you can see the general idea isn't too dissimilar, but the look, the anatomy, everything, the pose changes quite a bit. So it's something to take into account. And then also kind of you have slumped and elbows down, but then the hands are coming back. It's coming back up and over. And it's something that, depending on your perspective, the perspective of the piece, how you're trying to approach it, could be pretty difficult because the arms are going to overlap here. And then this the further arm is probably not going to be as apparent. But you can see already how having this base, going from the thumbnail to this kind of pose, is going to be much more dynamic than my original, this one. I mean, you know, it's all right, it's fine. But this is going to be much more like an actual Magic card. But I think the other kind of having that hang, it's not just a vertical. Your elbow is not like at 90 degrees. It's and you're holding it behind your back. It's a complicated pose. Yeah, this is gonna be something a little difficult, but I think if I really get the anatomy and everything down the way I want it, it's gonna be much more successful. And that's the thing that's kind of difficult about these kinds of drawings is or drawings in general really is that if you have something that looks out of place, like a perfect drawing, you might just pass it over. You might not think about it too much. But as soon as you have something that doesn't look right, especially with a humanoid character, something that we can actually relate to and understand, as soon as it doesn't look right, your brain picks up on it and it stands out. So it's kind of the unfortunate thing about, if you're a very talented artist with great skills for anatomy and stuff like that, people are not going to appreciate it as much probably, or it's not going to stand out as much as with something that they'll definitely appreciate, but it's going to stand out less than something that doesn't look right. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this layer folder as well, so I could start to manipulate things more. And one of the things I've mentioned on the streams before is the book Drawing Comics the Marvel Way. I think I just noticed here when working on this piece that one of the things that makes that always stuck with me about that book is because it's dealing with like superheroes. You have all the like tights and stuff like that, and when you have tights and then different pieces of like armor and equipment, you can really tell where parts of the body start and stop. And just when you break down an illustration in that way, um, it becomes much easier to draw something that's anatomically going to look correct. So having sections like this, And I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at that Yankee pose again. This is just one that I'm not too familiar with. Nice. So I'm gonna go back a little bit, try to implement some of what I kind of learned doing that sketch, but I don't think the pose is as good. So maybe change it up a little bit. And also, I'm finding that um, holding it like this is going to be a little bit difficult. So maybe having something more. I don't know. In general, I like the look of this, but I think anatomically, it's not going to look right with a huge brush or pen held on the back like that. So I think I'm going to use this pose that I liked and do a different kind of different look, maybe more like a monk or something holding a big staff like this. And then maybe we have one arm slung over it and the other one supporting, something like this. I feel like it's going to be much more dynamic. And since I'm trying to, it's more focused on drawing something, I can always redesign the text of the card that I'll end up, putting out there. So maybe it could be more like a monk or something now, or it could still be, a big brush, a big pen with a similar effect. But I'm glad I ended up here. So how is this gonna look now? So even something like this, a more ninja style pose, could be interesting. Sometimes you just have to, even though it's good practice to push yourself and um, try poses that you've never done, sometimes you also want to have a nice drawing, so you can work with whatever you feel strongest, or whatever you feel like you're gonna at least be able to put out the pose that you feel most confident in, to produce something nice. So I think also, anatomy is hard enough as it is, and so is perspective. But when you're trying to do kind of both at the same time, have an interesting or anatomically correct pose and interesting perspective, it can be quite difficult to achieve that. With this kind of like, I want to point the knee closer to the viewer, but it's something I think is difficult to pull off correctly, because you need to show like the base where the leg begins and connected to the hip, but also the shin area a little bit and the foot. So if you don't do it perfectly, it's going to stand out and look really weird. So maybe something like that, but I think even the placement is not good. Let me also I think it's interesting. I don't draw too many more dynamic actiony poses, more comic booky poses. Not so much like of this muscle and more realistic look, I guess. Even though I do enjoy it quite a bit, so I think doing these kinds of streams will be a good way to practice that kind of thing. Is if you're able to really understand muscles, the skeleton, all that, you're going to have a much easier time coming up with different poses and knowing how you should like how things should go where, even the folds of the clothes, things like that will come a little bit more natural. Of course, I was looking at the poses for this like Yankee style bent over look that you see in anime and Japanese culture from like the 80s and all, which does appear in this Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set. because not everything's gonna come to you like super intuitively. But I'm getting more and more satisfied with this pose and look as time goes on. I'm kind of thinking that it should be flipped though with this. If I keep this look, I think I'm going to flip it so that the heavy part is over here. And then maybe, I mean, it's kind of like a spear, I guess, if you think about it. The dip pen, that skip pen. It could be some giant spear. So maybe the drawing token could be like tap sacrifice, deal 1 damage to something, or tap pay 1 sacrifice, something like that. I've always also been interested in like game design and game mechanics as far as card games go. I mean, of course, I would love to still work on card games or video games. But when I was a kid, I would design my own cards and try to make, you know, kind of games based around probably the games I was playing at the time. And they would tend to be kind of a more fantasy setting and have equipment like this and medieval characters and stuff like that. Hmm. Hmm. I would just draw them on paper, cut them out, and kind of. I would never really play with them because I would never establish any like rules or anything. So something like that. I think I'll tweak the design, especially as you start to add clothes and different layers to the piece. Things tend to change. And this is another point where the mesh transform comes in really handy. And even, depending on kind of the drawing that you're doing, um, the look that you're going for, it's also not a bad point in the piece to think about your colors and shadows. So this foot right here is going to be further, it's going to be closer to the viewer. I guess, maybe the light source, maybe we can kind of do that here, but I tend to go with something like this most of the time. So if you're thinking about this kind of lighting setup, this foot here is going to be more in the shadows, and this area is also going to be in the shadows here, but this is going to be very well exposed right here. And in general, I think for any kind of serious work you're trying to do, it's very much worth going through things like this. If you don't, by the point that you actually get coloring, you might notice, oh, something doesn't match up, or you might forget about your light source, different things like that. Very easy to overlook. So if you want to draw something more professionally, or for an actual client, or just have some actual, really valuable practice, doing this kind of prep work is really important. And it's something that I should probably do more often. I feel like I don't do it enough. I just kind of dive right into it, which is not always the right, it's often not going to be the right thing to do. Then now we can start to really add these details. So maybe we could do something very Japanese. Like these like tall, what's it, gita, I think, or the sandals. But here's another like perspective. I think, I spent a lot of time on this drawing trying to get the perspective and anatomy correct, and here we're dealing with another very tricky perspective item, accessory, and I don't know how much I want to commit to having this be super accurate as well. And I've tried to draw sandals and stuff like this in the past, and it is a difficult thing to do, especially when you have kind of raised feet like this. They're not completely on the sandal. Also, because I kind of want to do a background for this piece, with a lot of the Neon Dynasty cards being very like cyberpunk and neon backgrounds and stuff like that. I think the lighting will also, it'll be a good lesson for me to practice lighting, posing, all these kinds of things. Let me actually take a look at some of these cards again. And especially if you think about Magic the Gathering cards, the original piece, is probably whether it's digital or traditionally drawn and painted, oftentimes the focus of the piece, the character, isn't going to be huge. So you have a lot of elements, the background, poses, lighting, everything is always super well done and something to aim for, you know, as an artist. So at this point, I want to start thinking about what my background's going to look like, not just for lighting, but also for kind of making sure everything blends together. I think what often happens for me is I will draw something and then the background is an afterthought. I just try to like throw something on at the very end and, you know, it doesn't end up looking good because you have two separate pieces almost, you know. You want to be able to draw them at the same time and keep them relatively similar. Because even look at this one. Let me see if it appears. Yeah. Return to action is a very flat, I guess, coloring, but like it's flat compared to the other cards that are more like 3D painterly. But if you tried to do this afterwards, after you already drew the main character very like detailed with a 3D look, and you tried to do a very simple background like this, it really wouldn't mesh. So you have to know from the beginning what you're going for if you want to have this kind of successful piece. And also things like perspective and everything. So where would this type of character be? I think it's kind of a similar, we're going for something similar to the enormous energy blade type thing. It's hard. A lot of Magic the Gathering art is just so dynamic that it's hard to really figure out what to do as someone who doesn't typically draw backgrounds and all. So maybe, yeah, at the very least, I want to have like, if we're going to deal with tokens and all, have these like manuscripts floating around, maybe. Or even like a scroll here. I don't know exactly what colors I would want this piece to be in either. I like a lot of times if I'm gonna make a constructed deck, I like maybe like Orzhov black white. I always like the themes of that. But I mean any color I can see myself going in any kind of direction and adjusting the flavor and the ability of the card. Or even going colorless just to make things simple. It's kind of like a drawing token that sacks to deal damage or something. Definitely sounds like a more of a red theme or attribute. Maybe it could also be like I don't know, you get some kind of stat boost, but it deals damage. I don't know, I would like a flavorful thing, so maybe something like it deals 1 damage to you, opponent gains 1 life, but you get a big stat boost. Or like you get to draw a card. Maybe it's, Yeah, maybe something like that. Because if you think about drawing, you're spending a lot of time and energy and, possibly you're spending a lot of time and energy, so you're kind of depleting your resources. But you're making other people kind of entertained or feel good or feel something, and then you get benefit from that, I guess. I mean, of course, you get benefit from just drawing and enjoying, whatever hobby or work that you do, but something along those lines would be interesting. So I have to workshop it a little bit more, think about it a little bit more. Also, I feel like my perspective is slightly off here. Mm. Hmm. I feel like it has more to do with the feet that I'm not satisfied with, or like the legs in general. And even sometimes I just get so lazy I don't even draw the feet. I only do upper bodies. I find this to be much more, I don't know, fulfilling, I guess. whenever I draw a piece like this, it makes me so much more happy than just upper body, like cute style anime piece, I guess. But I think it's much, I don't know, easier is not the right word, but if you're just doing an upper body kind of cute anime style thing, you have a lot more leeway as far as anatomy and things like that. People are not gonna think something looks weird as much as a more realistic piece like this, or not realistic, but a full body, more realistic pose and all. But I think if this goes well, I might change a lot of my icons to this because I'm liking it quite a bit. So I think maybe it was more the perspective on this leg, and I should have. Let me try to do this one more from scratch. So we have. I don't know, this posing always gets me. Especially feet. I think I have to do um once I start doing the kind of classes on, or not classes, but the book club style streams where we all draw the same thing for a few weeks or a few days. One of the first lessons has got to be like hands and feet. Because I think it's the thing that people have the least experience with. It's the thing that looks the weirdest when you don't do it anatomically correct. It stands out so much, and it could take a decent piece and kind of make it look not so good. And this is the type of pose that it's probably better to take a picture of yourself doing it, or I was looking up earlier, kind of I'll bring it up here, but like a Yankee pose. So this kind of, I don't know if it could be that kind of pose. I feel like it works well with some of the Neon Dynasty cards, like this red one. I forget the name of it now. Like this kind of Upriser Renegade that has more of a Yankee style look. So I'm trying to draw something that fits in this flavor and this theme. I don't know. At first I was trying to do something more like this that might just work out better for me personally. Is the other pose was getting a little bit difficult. So maybe something more like that will work out better. Hmm. Hmm. I feel like I'm getting close, but not 100% satisfied yet. So maybe like folded and sitting on something. Let me see how I can. So something like this also feels pretty appropriate, like a folded legs look. But in general, I've just always had trouble with this kind of posing. I think sometimes legs can be the hardest because it's something I guess you're not looking at as much, and even trying to imagine like where feet should go in this kind of pose, I feel like it's pretty difficult. Even if you have a good understanding of anatomy and posing, we're looking at our hands all the time. We're looking at more the full body, full picture a lot of times, but rarely, I think, are we looking at kind of the way that the anatomy of our legs and feet work. So it's hard to even like imagine it. So you're definitely trying to find a good posing um, pictures of whatever pose you're looking for, thinking about like looking at them and thinking about, all right, the bones would go here, joints are here, this is where things connect and bend. That way you can really get an anatomically correct pose. I think if you're looking at a picture and trying to draw it exactly like the picture, oftentimes you're not getting the right perspective, the right um, anatomy, or something tends to look weird if you're just straight looking at the picture and trying to draw it. It's much better to like analyze the picture, understand what's going on with the anatomy or the pose, um, and then try to structurally like recreate that and incorporate into your piece. And I think one of the major problems with that is often the perspective of what you want to do and the picture that you're looking at aren't going to match up exactly. And, different angles of lenses and the way the photo was taken could affect that as well. So you always want to do it from scratch with the posing or with the geometry and skeletal kind of base and build upon that. So even say now I looked up monk kind of sitting folded, this classic look. Even if you try to incorporate clothes over your pose, it's still going to be really important to get the anatomy down correct so you know where things fold, where like the limits of the clothes would be, stuff like that. So right now I feel like this is maybe one of the most the strongest pose I've kind of drawn so far as far as anatomy, framing, composition, all that goes. Also not simplicity but just reasonability for me to kind of move on and continue with the piece. But we'll see as things go on. So I'm going to look now back at some of the cards and try to get some inspiration for um, clothes and other pose and the background, of course. I think maybe now just came up with something. I think having an ink bottle here would be perfect to sit on. And then maybe, let me see how much time I have for this stream. Um, like it could be a tiny, it could be just a tiny little character on a desk. So the background could be some like neon storefront or desk. So it looks like a huge pen, but it's actually pretty small or normal sized. Or, I think there's a very big like scope to a lot of this. So this set with all the robots and giant mechs, different stuff like that. Um, I could go big, just make it giant ink bottle and pen. So I might redo this, but also when it comes to uh, trying to draw something with perspective, it's always good to have some kind of basis as to um, where those lines should go. Because if not, it's another aspect that just looks wonky and people tend to notice it very quickly. Perspective, anatomy, other things like that. But like I was talking about earlier, this kind of posing is something that I don't have much practice with, and I think it's definitely something to brush up on. something like this. Hmm. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. I think I got, a lot of what I want out of this. The flavor of the set and putting my own spin on it, different things that I enjoy and I feel like are related to the channel, but also this other hobby of mine with Magic and card games. And again, with that, with the new set being something, I think I felt like I could challenge myself with neon lights and a little bit more cyberpunk, but also more challenging poses, even kind of composition, card design, different things that I'm very interested in, but haven't had a chance to explore too much. It took me a little while to get to this, and I do appreciate if anyone does watch till the very end here. I think I'm going to work on it a little bit off stream to get it exactly where I want, especially with the background. I got to really think about what's going to be feasible for my timeline as well as my skill level for backgrounds and all that. But I think it's going to be a good chance to practice different lighting techniques. Already this pose is something that I would not normally do. I'm really happy with it. And if you do, like this kind of thing, please let me know. I want to do more in the future. And I'm going to mess around with the sketch, try to get the composition and anatomy as perfect as I can, and maybe come back tomorrow to do the line work and some base color, or maybe get started coloring and all that. We'll have to see. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Skippen, and I'll be back soon. See ya.